The Double Life of Pocahontas, Chapter 5. No matter how much Nemontac had told the Indians about London, they could never have imagined what it was really like. Not even Pocahontas could have been prepared for this gigantic, boisterous, noisy, crowded city. Horses, carriages, and carts fighting each other for room on the narrow streets. People shouting that they had scissors for sale, hot buns for sale, flowers for sale. Buy here, buy here, buy, they cried. Even buildings seemed to be in competition, pushing against each other. Rooftops rising over other rooftops. Windows staring down other windows as if to make sure no one was getting ahead of anyone else. Even church bells clanged for attention. Crossly, it seemed, each bell trying to drown out the others. Undoubtedly, John Rolfe had described the famous London Bridge, but Pocahontas wouldn't have expected the business of the city to continue without let-up right over the water. Stores, houses, buildings packed together on the bridge itself. Perhaps the only things in all of London that might even faintly have reminded Pocahontas of her girlhood home were the poles at the end of the bridge. They had human heads on top of them, heads that had been cut off enemies or criminals. Yet nothing in England affected Pocahontas as much as the news she heard on her first arrival. John Smith was alive. Indeed, he was in London. Right now? Right now. He had recently returned from exploring New England, she was told, and he was hoping to go back. But he was here now. If Pocahontas had ever been unhappy about coming to London, she was unhappy no longer. Secretly, her heart must have turned cartwheels. Here they were countrymen, both in the same country at the same time. He would be calling on her any day, any minute. He must have known that she was there. Everyone in London seemed to know. She couldn't step out of the inn where the Rolfes were staying without people on the street stopping to gawk. She couldn't attend a party without the news circulating through town. Yet John did not call. She looked for him on the streets, at parties, but she didn't see him. Lady Delaware took charge of Pocahontas, seeing that she had the proper clothes, instructing her in formal manners, introducing her to lords and ladies, preparing her for her presentation to the king and queen. And Pocahontas did well. Wherever she went, Londoners remarked on her regal bearing and her correct behavior. Yet Pocahontas could not help but notice that the strangers who met her always seemed surprised, and the Virginia backer who introduced her always acted proud. It was as if the Virginia people were saying, "See, she is an example of how well we can civilize savages." And as if the strangers were replying, "Well, we must civilize them all." She would have heard snatches of plans that were being proposed. A school for Indian children in Henrico, a campaign to eliminate heathen priests. When people praised Pocahontas for having brought peace to Virginia, there was something about their praise that suggested she should be able to keep peace in Virginia. When they discussed their plans for her people, it was as if she had a share in carrying them out. Obviously, they believed that their plans were truly for her people and not against them. Yet she knew these plans would lead to trouble. If only she could talk to John Smith. But he didn't come. Meanwhile, Pocahontas was entertained by the Bishop of London. At Christmas, she attended the court's Christmas festival, sitting on the special platform with the royal party. An engraving made of her at this time shows the face of a strong-minded woman surrounded by a high lace collar. Although she looks severe and older than her years, her mouth shows a hint of merriment as if it were something remembered from long ago. Indeed, there was not much reason to be merry now. Perhaps her happiest times came when she could be alone with Pocahontas and little Thomas. Now she could take off her hard-soled shoes and her scratchy ruffs, relax into her native language, and allow her old self to speak out. Best of all, she could, in Indian style, share her pleasure in little Thomas, who had become so important in her life. There is no record of what Pocahontas thought of London and her social life. Perhaps she shared her impressions only with Matahana, perhaps not even with her. But it is clear that what Tomomo thought. He had no use for the English at all. Of course, he had to admit that there were a lot of them, more than there were leaves on the trees, he said. Far too many to count. He had thrown away his stick at the first sight of England. But numbers were all they had. Their streets smelled, their river was dirty, their air was unfit to breathe, pickpockets roamed the city, and crazy people were locked away in special buildings, while of course Indians knew that crazy people were the ones whom the gods most often spoke through. Dressed in Indian fashion, painted and feathered as usual, Tomomo even argued about religion with the Bishop of London. When Sir Thomas Dale, acting as interpreter, he asked the bishop what the English god looked like, but the bishop couldn't even show him a picture. A lot of fair-sounding words he gave, but none of them added up to arms or legs or even a head. A poor sort of god, Tomomo reasoned. One who didn't even tell the men how to wear their hair. Indian men all wore their hair the same way, long on the left side, shaved close on the right so it wouldn't interfere with their bowstrings. And how did they know to do this? Because Oki told them, just as he told them how to grow corn, something else the English god knew nothing about. But what about their king, Tomomo asked. When was he going to see him? Now I'm going to stop here. This is the end of Chapter 5, Part A. We're stopping on page 76, and we will continue with the next video, Chapter 5, Part B.